G'day, I'm DK.
And I'm Ardeet.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, a segment from the Australia Talks podcast.
Yeah, this is one of our favourite parts of bringing the podcast to you, our listeners.
So please enjoy this segment from the regular podcast.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man.
All right, this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, we're going west, all the way west. Actually, as far as you can go west on the Australian mainland. We're going back to the region of Shark Bay, specifically to the southern region of Shark Bay. And we're going to go to a town that I'm going to tell you straight up, you're not allowed to go here. Like, if you are listening to this and go, oh, wow, I'd really like to go. You can't. I'm sorry. It is a closed town. But it is called, and I'll come back to that in a minute, why it's a closed town. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
Good. Yeah, I thought it was a forward sizzle.
Yeah, I'm powering through. But we're going to go to the town of Useless Loop, Western Australia, which... Okay, the elephant in the room is, what the hell is that name? Useless Loop is absolutely a strange name. And previously we've covered a couple of towns in this area because the Shark Bay region is so fascinating and it has so much going for it. Through the research for some of those other areas in the past, Useless Loop obviously stands out because it has a really, really strange name. But the town itself isn't particularly interesting. So I've kind of skipped over it. And it's also quite small. So I sort of thought, there's probably not too much there that we can go into. But there is actually a couple of things that do make it really interesting around it, which I will get into in a minute. But let's start with the name, because I feel like you got to explain what the hell this name is. So it all starts with a French captain, Nicholas Thomas Bolden, born in 1750, just a couple of weeks ago, and he became a well-known navigator and naturalist. And quite famously, he led an expedition approved by Napoleon Bonaparte himself to Western Australia in 1800. He was attempting to complete a voyage of discovery that would further scientific knowledge and perhaps even eclipse the achievements of Captain James Cook, who famously had he was killed in Hawaii, but his voyage had returned not long before Captain Nicholas Bolden decided to set off into his journey. Side note, Captain Bolden is also quite famous on the podcast for his meeting of Matthew Flinders on the 8th of April, 1802 in Encounter Bay in South Australia, which I think we've mentioned every early April as it comes up on This Week in Australian History. But so he's the other guy that met Matthew Flinders, which certainly would have been a bit awkward because a bit awkward. Britain and France were at war at the time. A peace treaty had been signed literally like a couple of weeks before their encounter, so it certainly would have been quite awkward, that initial encounter. But thankfully, both parties were aware of the treaty that had been signed, so there was no hostility between them. But it certainly would have been an interesting experience. I would have liked to be a fly on the wall for that meeting. But anyway. Henry Louis Frichet was an explorer on the Baldwin expedition, and he complained that in Shark Bay there was what appeared to be a really good natural harbour, but a sandbar had stopped him and his ships from entering into that natural harbour, and he named the place Havre in. I'm going to butcher this because I don't speak French, but Havre in Tualal, which means useless harbour, which, and I should say, to his credit, he's not just a whinging Frenchman. There are quite a lot of natural sandbars in the area of where he would have been trying to navigate into. And so his complaint, isn't entirely him just being dramatic, as often the French are, but the name stuck because, of course, he was the first known European to name a thing on a nautical chart. And as we know from the past, those nautical charts get copied and copied and so on and so forth. And the name has stuck. And so a useless loop is what it's ended up being translated as, and useless inlet is right nearby. And basically, ever since, it's been known for being useless. But it has found its modern use. Today, Useless Loop is a company town. The company is the Solar Salt Operation Shark Bay, and it's owned by Mitsu, a Japanese company who has owned it since 1973. And the company, the town is a company town, and it is closed to the public because it is private property, essentially. It does.
Oh, right. Okay.
It does have about 165 permanent residents who are mostly employees and their families. Well, they are pretty much exclusively employees and their families of the solar salt operation. Though some of them are sort of, groundskeepers and government workers and associated, but they're all part of the salt operation that is there. And this all began back in the 1960s when the Shark Bay salt field was first established, because the seawater in Shark Bay is about 1.5 times saltier than the open ocean. And this high concentration of salt means that it's much, much easier to harvest than just pumping out regular salt water and waiting for it to evaporate. Of course, Shark Bay's hot, dry climate is ideal for solar salt mining, and the lack of pollution in the area, the geology and the biology in Shark Bay means that the salt that's produced there is 99.7% pure. The secret sauce here is that the natural seagrass that grows in Shark Bay, it helps clean the water, and it actually retains the water within the bay, allowing it to flow into the bay and then holding it there. So the transfer of water out of the bay is significantly delayed. And as such, a lot of the water in the bay does evaporate, and thus increases the natural.
Right.
Yeah, it increases the natural salinity of the water, which is then pumped into the mining area. Today, the farm encompasses 70 square kilometers of operational salt ponds, which is absolutely massive. The salt field was built by enclosing natural islets. Seawater is then pumped into the first evaporation pond from the Useless Inlet area, which contains about 64 square kilometers of operation ponds, or evaporators as they're called. And this is, there's a whole, without getting into too much detail, basically they use the tides as like an aid and pumps and a whole heap of things. There's quite a lot that goes into it, rather than just sort of, we just throw some water in this field over here and we wait until it dries out. But the concentrated brine, in the Useless Inlet area is transferred into the Useless Loop area through a 20-kilometer long flume. And the Useless Loop area has 37 crystallizer ponds in various sizes and shapes, a saltwater washing plant and a stockpile area, and its own loading port as well. The company operates it's an absolutely massive operation. Yeah. It's an absolutely huge operation. And the company operates a residential village, which is the town of Useless Loop, within close proximity to the operation, which provides employees and their families with housing, recreational facilities, and schooling. I'll come back to this in a minute and explain a little bit more how this works. So if you can't really picture what this looks like, we've included a bunch of photos and as always, resources in the show notes, one of which is actually an ABC News program, a video about it, which gives you so much more detail than I'll go into here. And I would strongly recommend reading it, watching it, sorry. But if you can't do that, if you just go to the salt.com.au link that's in the show notes, that will show you pictures of this facility. But if you're driving and you want to know, I want you to imagine basically what like a giant rice paddy shaped field is. So it's pretty much a flat paddock with sort of a hump of soil around the whole exterior, so it is lower than the surrounding landscape. And they fill this with, generally it's a sort of a few inches deep at a time of water, of the salty brine, and then they leave it to evaporate in the sun. And once it gets to a certain point, the salt crystals start essentially growing from the ground up, and then they pump a bit more water in and a bit more water, and they just build the salt layer up and up and up and up and up. And over 12 months, they grow the salt crystals.
Wow, 12 months.
Yep. And each pond is harvested once a year. They use a lot of heavy machinery. So the sorts of equipment that you would see for like road maintenance, basically, they use graders and excavators. It's kind of unusual to see because they're harvesting. Well, essentially they're mining the salt, but they're also growing it. So it's a bit of a weird. It's sort of like a farm. It's more akin to farming than it is to mining, but.
Bloody hell, imagine the maintenance on the steel on those things that are just driving over salt all day.
Oh, yes. They must use a lot of oil to help keep that salt off. But once each pond is harvested, approximately once a year, it is then cut up, put onto a truck and driven to the port, which is right next door, where it is washed with a brine solution to make sure it's clean, because sometimes they'll get a bit of dirt and things like that in it, of course, and you'll always get a little bit of impurities just because it's open to the air. And then that 99.7% pure salt is then transported onto a ship for export. And the Shark Bay Port Facility at Useless Loop can run an export load rate of 22,000 metric tons per day, which is
of salt,
which is insane. Obviously, they don't run that much every single day, but overall, they still produce 1.3 million tons of salt per year, which is a hell of a lot of salt. There's literal mountains of salt sit at the port facility ready for export. And some of the photos of the size of these piles of salt is just absolutely insane. It's very, very cool. Of course, as this is sea salt, the resource is, in a human scale, is basically infinite and very much renewable. So whilst it's technically mining, it's more akin to farming than you sort of would traditionally think of mining as a resource. And this is important because the Shark Bay area is actually a national park, though the salt mine was here before the national park was established. And as a result, they have very strict environmental rules around how they can process the salt and very, very strict environmental regulations around the salty brine leaching into the environment and those sorts of things. So it's very, very heavily regulated and very, very much the government is on top of, because it is such a pristine environment that this sits in the middle of. Because it is kind of more akin to farming than mining in a traditional sense, it's allowed. And so far, there haven't really been any problems with it as well. What I think is really impressive is because Useless Loop is a company town, and that company is Mitsu, a Japanese company, traditionally, when you think of sort of like fly in, fly out workers, particularly in Western Australia, you're thinking of sort of the iron ore mines, the coal mines, those sorts of things. But of course, this isn't a traditional FIFO sort of working environment because they have built the town of Useless Loop. And what I think is more impressive is more than 50% of the employees and residents that live in the town of Useless Loop have lived there for more than 10 years. So they are very clearly quite happy with their working and living conditions, and they must enjoy living out there as well. And are probably treated quite well, I'd imagine. Yeah. Otherwise they probably would have left. FIFO traditionally is quite a difficult working environment, so I think having more than half your employees have been there for that long is exceptionally impressive, given the rest of sort of the FIFO mining industry. They have a medical center, a library, a community center, swimming pool, playgrounds, a small sort of convenience store type shop. They have their own school and even a pub. So they're not really missing out too much there. And they also appear to have quite a close-knit community as well. Lots of community events, lots of community barbecues and all of that kind of stuff. What impressed me the most, though, was actually the school. This serves students from kindergarten to grade 12 and generally only enrolls around about 30 students. As you can imagine, there aren't too many kids in this area because there's only about 200, well, less than 200 residents at any one time. But for the fact that the school is so small, it is significantly well resourced and has quite high standards from what I've seen. And what I thought was really interesting was Japanese is also taught as standard, which is pretty unique here in Australia. So the company very much wants their employees' kids to, be able to effectively communicate when I'm sure they grow up and maybe take over their parents' roles in the community. As I said, unfortunately, it is a closed town though, so you can't really go there without permission. That is unless, of course, you become an employee of Mitsu. So as nice as it might sound, you can't just drive up and join the community. And actually, they did say that if you want to become an employee when they do have openings, they interview the entire family to make sure not only are you fit to do the job.
Is that right?
Yeah, that you're fit for the community as well, which I think is really important.
Interesting.
In a place like that. It is a really small community and you need to make sure that not only do you fit in the working role, that you also fit within the community as well, which I think I completely understand, why they'd want to do it that way. So I think wildly international history of Useless Loop, a company town that was named by a French explorer, mined by Aussies and then the Japanese to produce some of the highest quality salt in the world, highly prized. And so next time you go to Japan and you're watching the sumo wrestling and they throw salt around the ring, there is a very good chance that is Australian shark-based salt that they're using.
Fantastic. Funny you should say that. I'm just in the middle of watching the sumo. I think it's at Nagoya. I've just been watching the highlights. Haven't been watching the whole thing. But that's funny that you should say that. Well, that's amazing. I wouldn't expected to have got all that interesting stuff out of that, and that interviewing the family. I mean, look, I suppose you're a remote community. You can't afford to have friction and dissent. But I don't think I've ever heard. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I don't think I've ever heard of that before. Have you?
Yeah, I think in this, because it is a unique situation, and I do think this is one of those ones where it's like, because it's a remote community, it's a very small community, it's more than just a job. It's you live here, you work here, and so you need to fit in, and so does your family. They do like psychological evaluations and everything to make sure that not only can you live remote? Can you do the work? But also, you know, are you going to fit in? Are you the sort of person that we want here and everything like that? And look, I understand that probably kind of skirts some discrimination laws and things like that. But at the end of the day, this is a private company. It's all company property and those sorts of things. So I do feel like this very much kind of crosses that line in my mind. To a point where it's like, no, like we've got to make sure that if you're out here, you're a long way from anywhere else. So,
yeah. Mates of the podcast, you want to have a look on Google Maps or Apple Maps and see where it is. You haven't got a shop down the road. Sorry, you literally do within the town.
Within the town.
A company shop. But aside from that, without it's really not near much at all. You know, there's a couple little other little communities around there, but yeah, you'd want to be happy. You'd want to be happy living there.
Oh, yes. And I should say as well, they do have their own little airstrip. So they can fly in and fly out if they do need to. There is a road. It's not completely cut off from the mainland. There is a road, a single road, I should say. But it's so remote. The closest town to it is the town of Denham, which is across the bay. But when I say that, I'm sort of talking like 30 Ks sort of thing from like the nearest town across the water.
That's as the crow flies.
Yeah, as the crow flies. You know, without flying, a boat would be your quickest way in and out across to Denham, which I'm sure they probably do to get some resources and stuff like that, because Denham's it's not much bigger, but it is you know, has like 1,000 people sort of thing that lives there, so there's a bit more, and it's very much sort of the touristy area of this region as well.
Denham is.
So yeah. So
right.
Like if you're in this area, if you're going to Shark Bay, that's where most people go, is to the town of Denham. If you've heard of Dirk Hartog Island, which a lot of people have heard of, and for a lot of people it is a bit of a bucket list place to go as well. That is sort of north and the last bit west of Useless Loop. So the people that come to this area are normally hardcore fool drivers and travelers that want to get that photograph on the most westerly point of Western Australia, which is sort of quote unquote just up the road from Useless Loop. But other than that, there really isn't anything out here. You are surrounded by a whole lot of nothing. So yeah, you best fit in otherwise. And look, if you want to go to this region, I would really highly recommend you to. It's 100% on my bucket list, somewhere that I'd love to go. And actually, I think part of me is a little bit scared to go here because I think I'll like it so much I won't want to leave. It very much ticks all my boxes. It's dry, it's sunny, it's surrounded by beautiful water and marine environments, you know, tick, 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 tick. So maybe I'll have to go when I'm a little bit older so I can be here for my kids before I disappear into the WA beaches. But anyway, one day, who knows? Maybe I'll get to go to the town of Useless Loop, but very few people will. But if you want to get out to Western Australia, get out there, get to Shark Bay, have a look around, and maybe if you go to Denham, you'll see Useless Loop on the horizon, forever out of your reach.
Oh, that's great. I wonder if the local shop there sells salt.
Well, interestingly, I'm not sure that they do. Well, if they do, it probably isn't from there because almost all of it is exported to Japan and other parts of Asia. So I'm not even sure how much of it is actually consumed in Australia as well. I think a lot of it.
Well, that'd be interesting. But I meant, look, sure, if you're working there, they wouldn't care if you grabbed a handful and chucked it in your pocket.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm sure. I'm sure the within the town they've probably got plenty. Or maybe they're sick of it
for their chips.
Maybe they're sick of it. And they're like, nah, everything's unsalted. We don't use it here. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be funny. It's all unsalted.